And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Pace and Johnson
for the cinema review.
It is Monday, 8 EST, July 3rd, and thank you all for joining me for another episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. This week we have an exciting episode. We are going to be reviewing the fifth entry in the Indiana Jones franchise, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, as well as the new animated film from DreamWorks Animated Studios, Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken. And joining me to review Indiana Jones, the Dial of Destiny, it is his second time on this show. It is the one, the only, Caleb the King Coho. Caleb, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm excited. I saw this movie Thursday, and I still have not unpacked the movie out loud with anyone, and it's been killing me.
That is completely fair. Honestly, full transparency, I was going to ask Mike. Mike was going to be my first guest on this show, and that probably would have been a lot more positive of an experience.
Yeah.
What we might get tonight, but I say we just jump right into our first review. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, directed by James Mangold. This is the first Indiana Jones film not directed by Steven Spielberg, but Harrison Ford once again dons the hat and whip for hopefully the final time. The man is 80. My God, you can go to sleep, my boy. But for real, I do not know why I said my boy, but whatever. This time, Indiana Jones is now in the 50s, and he is definitely on the verge of retiring. He's starting to feel like it's time to hang up the hat. But he decides it's time to go on one final adventure when he gets a call from his goddaughter, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Goddaughter being who is the daughter of a friend who we had not heard about through any of the other four films. But you know what? That's par course for this Indiana Jones franchise. And there are Nazis in this one. There are ancient relics. The usual shtick for Indiana Jones. Coho, what are your thoughts on the franchise as a whole thus far?
So I really like Indiana Jones a lot. Raiders of the Lost Ark and Last Crusade are brilliant films that I love a lot. I don't have as much love for Temple of Doom, and I'm sort of an apologist for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I think that movie's actually pretty good. But when it comes to the franchise, the simple rule of thumb has always been, if it's odd numbered, has a biblical artifact, and Nazis, it's going to be a good one. And so coming into this, seeing the Nazis, it was odd numbered, and Sala. So as long as it had these things, it would be good. And like when they were like, Sala's in this, and the Nazis are the bad guys, and the relic is not necessarily biblical, but it's ancient, and you're like, okay, I'll take 2 out of 3. And it's the fifth one. It's like, it's gonna be good. It has to be good. And I was left wanting a lot walking out of this one. I think the lack of Steven Spielberg is felt a lot, which is unfortunate. Because say what you will about Crystal Skull, that movie at least wholly feels like an Indiana Jones movie. At least in the way it looks, in the way it's shot, in the way the story's told, the way that things happen, where it plays out, where he's looking for something. And I think that's sort of my biggest thing, that I was like, oh, this is interesting and different. But the more I thought about it, the more I disliked it. Was just like, it loses that Spielbergian touch of I'm an adventurer going out to find something. And instead, it's I'm an adventurer who has already found half of something from my past, and then it gets taken from me. So now I'm chasing this thing that I really didn't give a shit about because it's half of something that she gives a shit about. And I feel like the motivations of Indiana Jones are wrong. I feel like a lot of the motivations of the story are wrong. But let me tell you, that shit opens hard.
Yeah, like you, I really do love this franchise a lot. Raiders of the Lost Ark, one of the most perfect action movies I think that's ever been released. Last Crusade, I put like maybe a hair behind Raiders in my personal ranking. I think Sean Connery is just excellent as Indiana Jones' dad. I'm kind of a Temple of Doom apologist. You're never going to convince me that Willie Scott isn't annoying, but Short Round no longer annoys me, and I do really do love the set pieces, and I just think it's just kind of like a weird outlier in the franchise. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull doesn't work for me as a whole. I don't think it's quite the abomination as some people make it out to be, but I do agree with what you say. I do think Crystal Skull still does have that indie feel until maybe like the last 30 minutes, where I think it kind of evolves into something else. But I think throughout the majority of that film, it does still feel like an Indiana Jones movie. And coming into this movie, I was just thinking, okay, Spielberg is no longer at the helm, so I honestly feel like that kind of takes a lot of the pressure off this movie in a way where at least it's not like ruining his legacy with the franchise, regardless of how bad it is. And it's funny, even though I do think I liked this more than Crystal Skull, I couldn't help but walking out of this movie thinking, wow, I still kind of wish they would have stopped at Last Crusade. Like, I still think that is the perfect ending for that franchise.
I genuinely think Last Crusade was you're never going to beat that ending. So the moment they're like, we're coming back to do a fourth, it's like, why? You hit a home run. But like, I feel like for the fourth one there, it at least ends in a satisfying place for me, where you can be like, at the very least, the aliens and shit is weird and dumb, and it fits into the evolution that Spielberg wanted to do of like, this is like 50s sci-fi pulp, which maybe doesn't fit Indiana Jones very well by the last 30 minutes. I don't hate it, but I get it. But at the very end, he ends up with Marion, he has a life, and he's done. He quite literally gets to still ride off into the sunset, even though he's old or lost to people. He has the most important person, and it's done. And this one picks up and instantly is like, nah, fuck that. He's old and sad and alone. And you're like, fucking what? Why? Why does it have to be that for him? Like, that's kind of like, I don't know. I really feel like we went back for another bite at the apple, and this time we lit the apple on fire and threw it in the trash. It's just like, I don't think this movie's necessarily bad. I just think it is dissatisfying as a farewell to the character.
Okay, that's completely fair. I actually want to touch on the character, specifically Harrison Ford's performance as the character. Harrison Ford has gone on record to say like how much this character means to him, which I honestly kind of think is kind of funny in hindsight, because like I think most people know he doesn't really care about the character of Han Solo.
Oh, yeah,
from all the stories you've heard on set, like he was honestly kind of happy to be done with Star Wars, but he definitely has a lot of respect for the character of Indiana Jones. But going to this movie, knowing how old Harrison Ford is now as an actor, I did kind of feel worried, would he still be able to capture that magic? And I personally think he was, because the movie wisely recognizes, look, this guy is not in his 30s anymore. This guy, stuff is now a struggle for him. He's going to get a lot more tired than even movies like Raiders, where I think the reason why I personally love those movies so much is because Indiana Jones always did feel fallible. He feels even more fallible here, and I think the movie definitely plays that up to a strength with that. What did you think about Harrison Ford's performance in this film?
So I think this is probably the worst Harrison's been in the part, but I don't think he's bad. I think that like it's just age. I think he's really actually better than he's been in most movies in a long time. He's very awake. He's very like, I'm invested in what I'm doing for a lot of the movie. Not all of it. There's definitely scenes where he's sleepy and he's tired and he's kind of over the movie he's making. But like, you can tell when he's in it. And when he's in it, he's funny. When he's in it, he's got that energy again. And you're like, it's the same way I feel watching Crystal Skull, where like for most of Crystal Skull, he's awake and in it. And then you get to the third act and he doesn't care anymore. But like, you can tell when he's getting into Indiana Jones' personal dynamics and his history and like how he feels as a person, he's vibing, he's clicking, he's enjoying the movie. And the more and more you get into the action stuff, you can tell the less and less he cares. Like for him, which is weird because Harrison Ford, we know, is like such an action guy. It's so weird to think of Harrison Ford as an actor who probably really doesn't like making action movies, but that's all he gets to make. It's kind of like you can tell he wants to be making more Mosquito Coast and Witnesses. Instead, he's like, I'm stuck doing the 5th Indiana Jones and the 19th Star Wars, but like he's having fun.
It's so funny you say that, because I personally think of all the characters he's returned to, I think his best performance was in Blade Runner 2049. And I think a lot of that is because that's probably the least amount of action that he was required to do. So he was the most invested in that role. But yeah, like what you were saying, like when it's just him, like honestly just talking with Helena, played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, like when it's just them going back and forth. I didn't get the complaint that people have been saying of her character overshadows Indy. Like, I think they played off each other really, really well. And I'll be honest, I think Phoebe Waller-Bridge is the best part of this movie. The addition of Helena Shaw. I wrote down her full name. I think is a great new addition. She adds a ton of new light into this film. From what I've heard, she actually wrote the majority of her dialogue. And I haven't seen Fleabag, but I hear that's an incredible show. So knowing that, I think her dialogue is definitely the best and the funniest. I think she has a ton of moments to shine as this new action heroine. What did you think about Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Helena?
I love her. I think she's the best part of the movie, and it's not even a particularly close thing. Like, I think she's just brings a whole new life to the franchise. Where it's like at the beginning, you're like, okay, is this what we're gonna do? And like, are we gonna kind of retread a lot of the old stuff by having her pull him back out and do the? Literally, she gives the pitch for what you think this movie's about to be. Where it's like Indiana Jones, the Great Adventurer, one last victory lap to find this thing, and I'm like, I don't mind watching that, but I kind of don't want that. And then instantly backstabbing that, being like, oh no, fuck archaeology. I hate you. I hate what my dad's become. And essentially he's just like, fuck you as a character, basically betraying the norms and concepts that the entire Indiana Jones pantheon of characters usually believe, and putting Indy sort of on his back foot as someone he cares about, I guess. That's another big issue I have with the movie. Where it's like, new person that we're just meeting, but apparently there's this really deep personal relationship between the two. That to me,
that's perfect for the franchise for me, honestly.
I guess, but I think the easiest fix for this is literally just make that character fucking short round. like to be honest, like if you just bring Kiwi Kwan back and do that, like it would literally fix that character in a way narratively.
With all the cameos in this movie, you can very clearly tell this movie was shot before Everything Everywhere All at Once came out.
Yes.
If it was shot after, there's no way we don't get a short round cameo.
I genuinely thought at the end Short Round was going to walk in the room, and I was going to be like, oh, well, it makes no sense, but they put him in the movie anyway. But to me, it's like if you made this character at least, honestly, another easy fix is making this Marcus's daughter. Like, to make it the second generation version of a character that we have a deep personal relationship with through Indiana Jones, and not just a totally new character that somehow had this relationship, I think is my biggest criticism with that character. But I think Phoebe Waller-Bridge is so fun that I almost don't care. That like she gets to bring such new energy to the series and to this movie. It just ultimately, that's my big criticism for this, is this movie hinges a lot on a relationship that is totally new and introduced, when I think in a franchise like Indiana Jones that is usually very good at implementing and introducing new things, it's done very sloppy and very jarringly. I think they try really hard by giving us that like 30-minute opening sequence that is really, really great to kind of set up the history. But like, to me, I needed more than just 30 minutes to explain why I should care. It's more, I really think this just should have been Marcus's daughter. Like, I feel like you could be like, oh, legacy franchise, but to me, that's setup, that's payoff, that's building on what's already there.
When I was walking into this movie, I genuinely thought that Helena was going to be Marcus's daughter, and like you, I was kind of confused why they didn't just go that route instead of introducing this brand new character played by Toby Jones, who's doing a fine job at the same time. I'm kind of like, okay, like Spielberg has that talent for making you care about things so quickly, and I just don't think Mangold quite has that grasp.
No.
But yeah, I do think Phoebe Waller-Bridge definitely is the most entertaining part of this movie. There were two set pieces I genuinely really love, and one of them was the chase through Morocco when Indy goes to Morocco to find her, and I think that's mainly due to the fact that there's just so much banter between these characters that it feels so lived in. But like you kind of alluded to, my favorite set piece of this movie is the first 30 minutes of that prologue in 1940s Germany. You see that Indy's been captured by the Nazis, and hey, like you said, what's the artifact the Nazis have? It's a Christian relic.
It's the Spear of Destiny, which everyone has been pitching since the beginning. It needs to be the final Indiana Jones relic, which also irritated the shit out of me, where it's like, you did it. You finally put the Spear of Destiny into an Indiana Jones movie, and it's a throwaway thing for the beginning of the movie.
But yeah, this whole opening sequence on the train, of the going from train track to train track, I think the de-aging de-aging effect is pretty dang good. Aside from
almost perfect.
Yes, it's almost perfect. aside from the fact that you can clearly tell that it's an 80-year-old person voicing a 30-year-old person, if you can take that apart, I think it's great. Like, what did you think about this?
It's not only that. It's like, yeah, you can clearly tell it's an 80-year-old man voicing a 30-year-old man. Like, you could just hear it in his voice. You're like, oh, that's weird. But the other thing that I noticed, and it's something that, like, the Marvel movies have done really well with, which is when they do de-aging, they put the characters in a closed environment where you don't have to see hair movement and light reflection off of skin. Because when he's on the train, he has the hat on, and then I don't notice it. But when he's jumping train car to train car and he has his hair out and it's not blowing in the wind, you're like, this is weird. Or like when like the moonlight hits and the different lighting set and his skin doesn't change. The other awful choice is to have him standing next to a real human. Like a real full human. Because Toby Jones and him being next to each other, like without being far distance, is weird. Like I genuinely, this is one of those sequences where I really wish Spielberg was the director because I think he would have made that work better. Because he would have at least shot the movie in a way where he knows the effect doesn't look good, so he's going to disguise the effect in the way he shoots the movie. Yeah, I think that's the touch that I love James Mangold to death. I think he's a very talented filmmaker, and I think he's very good at stepping into different stories and achieving different time periods and making very classic Americana kind of stories like Ford v Ferrari and Logan and giving a timeless feel to his movies. And I think he's a good candidate to make this. I just don't think he did a great job because I don't think the script's very good. But I think that that's my big issue is there's little things that Spielberg does with this franchise that you miss. Where it's like you said earlier, where it's like making you care so much about someone so fast. I didn't care about Toby Jones in this opening sequence very much, but I know that if Spielberg did it, it'd honestly be like you can hate the movie, but the Mac twist at the beginning of 4, Spielberg does a very good job of you being like, establish. Mac's a bad character, but at least in the beginning. That's not on Spielberg. That's just that character sucks. But at the very least, I get why Mac matters. Fair. Where it's like there's a history there, and why that betrayal is like, oh shit, okay, well that's kind of fucking mean of you. Like I honestly think Phoebe Waller-Bridge is playing the Mac part just with a better angle. And like, but Spielberg at least in that opening with Mac is like able to make you go, okay, I care about this at the thing. But the thing that Mangold and this opening does. That I do kind of like, which is like, I do wish the Spear of Destiny was the artifact they were going after, but I do love that the main artifact of this story is like this story is born out of a byproduct of a story that we never got to fully like involve in, you know, like there's a whole story that we're kind of like joining in the middle and riding out to the end. And it's kind of like Temple of Doom. It's opening where it's like, you're catching the end of an Indiana Jones adventure. I think this has the same problem almost where it's like I care more about the adventure that is ending than the one that you're going to present in the full scope of the story.
That is totally fair. Like even as someone who likes Temple of Doom, like the best moments of Temple of Doom is that opening in the club. Yeah. Like that is just so much fun. But yeah, okay, James Mangold as a director I really, really like. Like I love Ford v Ferrari. I love Logan. I love Girl Interrupted. I think the thing about Mangold is he does not have that auteuristic touch that someone like Spielberg does. Like James Mangold is a technically really sufficient director that doesn't like leave like an insane imprint on a ton of his movies. When I think you kind of want that with Indiana Jones as a whole. We talked about how we think Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Helena is a great new character. Honestly, I wasn't a big fan of either of any of the like newer characters added. Mads Mikkelsen, he can play this type of role in his sleep. As this evil Nazi. I wrote his character's name down. I want to make sure I pronounce it right. Dr. Jürgen Voller. It's your standard Nazi villain, nothing too interesting. This movie has one of my least favorite tropes that it's been around for a while, but I've been seeing it around today. It's what I'm calling a TOTK, and that is a tacked-on teenage kid. This time played by Ethan Isidore, who is plays a character named Teddy Kumar, who has been teamed up with Helena for a while. I don't know about you. I just didn't care about this kid that much. Like, he's just there for, like, he feels like a tacked on version of Short Round, but like not nearly as entertaining. It's set up early that he can't swim. And throughout the whole movie, you're like, well, I wonder how this is going to be resolved in the end.
Oh, I can't believe we're going to a diving set piece and we learned the kid can't swim. I wonder what's going to happen. No, I'm with you. I think this kid is not great. Like, nothing against the actor. I just think they don't give this kid anything to do. And clearly they want to do it as a way where it's like, oh, this is Helena's sidekick to show like Indy has sidekicks. She has a sidekick. She's the new whatever. Like, we're trying to like not that she's the new, but like she has her own world and adventures that she's been going on. But to me, I just don't care about that kid. Like, I think having him in that first set piece and then gone, awesome. Would have been great. Would have been fine. Like, that first chase through Morocco, I like the idea of him at the club learning how to fly planes, whatever. I think that's kind of fun. Yeah. And then obviously they pay that off, and I actually do kind of enjoy that element. But, like, he doesn't add anything to me. He just ends up presenting himself as sort of like a detriment to them, a liability on this mission at every turn. He doesn't add any value emotionally or really in stakes. It's a very contrived way to create stakes for Helena, and I don't love it. As for Mads, I want to know who Mads' agent is, because this is like the third or fourth time that Mads Mikkelsen, who's an incredibly talented actor, is basically just inserted into Hollywood blockbuster generic villain role. Because it's like he's not bad, and he's doing his best. It's just you made him the bad guy of an Indiana Jones movie. And most of the time, the Indiana Jones villains, at least if you don't know their name, you remember what they're after, or you remember they have some sort of thing about them where you're like, oh, this is why Indy would punch that Nazi. And the only reason is he's a Nazi that Indy punched once, that he was the side villain in the first story, and now he's the main villain of the last story. And you're like, why?
I stand by. First off, I'm just going to say this. There is, with the in-story explanation we see about Mads Mikkelsen's character, there is no reason why his face should not be just, like, horribly deformed. I was shocked that the movie didn't even acknowledge that. That, like, his face should be just completely like a Picasso painting. But my other favorite thing about this character is when you fully realize what this character's motives are. I said this in my Letterboxd review. He is the sports fan that says, if I were the coach, we would have won the whole season. Like, that is what this guy is at the end, and I kind of loved it.
I think that's really funny. But no, I think it's a great point that bothered me to the point where I thought they were going to address it with the ending, and then they didn't. And I was like, he should not be in the rest of the movie after the first 30 minutes. There should not be a villain. He should not be in the story. He should be dead. Like, this fucker should be dead after the prologue. But, like, or at least show up, like, in like Hugo Weaving at the beginning of First Avenger, where he's constantly adjusting his jaw and like twisting his face, and like he's wearing prosthetic masks, and then at the end you can do like the whole like, oh, he's horribly disfigured and trying to cover it up, like, which is still dumb, but at the end of the day it's something. But yeah, I don't know. My thing with Mads is just like, he's not as compelling of a villain as I want him to be. He doesn't get to do anything too sinister. In fact, it's weird, like, he doesn't have much of a personality at all, which is really disappointing for someone like Mads Mikkelsen to get to do. Like, at least I can tell you what Irena Spalko's thing is. Like, she's a bad villain, but I can tell you what her thing is. I can tell you what Belloc's thing is. Like, that's what irritates me about this one. This is just, I honestly would probably rank him below Cate Blanchett, because at least Cate Blanchett left an impression on me.
No, it's absolutely fair. I will say none of these people are my least favorite characters in this movie, and those characters have to be the villainous comic relief villains played by Boyd Holbrook and Oliver Richards, who essentially just sort of become like the two bumbling sidekicks of Mads Mikkelsen's character. What do you think about these guys? Because these guys did nothing for me.
I think Boyd Holbrook and James Mangold must have become really good friends on Logan for him to shoehorn him into this movie. Because to me, they are pointless and they're irritating. I don't really like anything they do. They're purely there out of necessity because they don't want to make Mads Mikkelsen chase in Harrison Ford on horseback, because you have just two old guys trying to fight. And I get they don't want to do that, even though Mads is significantly younger than Harrison. But, like, I still don't like the idea of, like, we're clearly putting Harrison Ford in non-combat situations, but still action set pieces. And the only way we can give him some sort of muscle or thrilling chases, because we're not going to have Mads chase him. We're going to have these random bumbling dudes that can't do anything right chase him. And it feels almost like a Marx Brother take on Indiana Jones henchmen than actual henchmen. And it's just frustrating. I don't know. The most interesting element to me with them was when they're like undercover, or maybe they don't really just explain this very well at all. Where it's like, are they undercover with the CIA? What's their exact relationship to the U.S. government? Why are they working with the CIA agent the way they are? But like, that is the only remotely interesting dynamic where it's like they're trying to kill, and the other person's like shoot to injure, and you're like, because she's not part of them. She's not aware that they are Nazis. So, like, to me, that's the only interesting dynamic, and they get rid of that fast.
That part of the movie, I could see what Mangold was trying to do of, like, oh, this is like a 60s, like, gritty crime movie in the same way how, like, the Indiana Jones movies are like 30s pulp adventures, but I just don't think Mangold can thread the needle quite like Spielberg can. All right, so it's funny, like, everything we've said about the movie, like, although there are elements I disliked, I think for the first 2/3 of this movie, I was still enjoying my time. Like, I was still having a fun time, and I was ready to walk out saying, like, okay, you know what? This was a solid adventure film. Man, the third act just does not work. And there are two folds. There are two parts of this, and I'm going to try not to go into super heavy spoilers here. The first half of the third act is set in, like, this super dark, poorly lit cave, and it's just, it's just boring visuals after boring visuals. You essentially know where this whole thing is going to be going, and then the last twist of this movie. If you thought aliens were bad, if you thought aliens were out of place in an Indiana Jones movie, this movie is that times 10. And not only that, like, the CG, which there is way too much CGI in this movie. I stand by. If you're making an Indiana Jones movie, you don't need to put too much CGI. There is arguably even more CGI in this movie than there was in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and especially in the third act is where I'm just like, okay, way too much green screen, way too much digital effects, and I hated it. Like, I hated the last 15 minutes of this movie before the epilogue. What did you think about this final act?
So twofold. The first half of it, where it's in the poorly lit cave, that's like, okay, if we're gonna end Indiana Jones, it's only fitting to put him in some ancient, under the Pantheon puzzle box finale, and he has to use his brain to get out of it. It doesn't do that. Last Crusade, Crystal Skull, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and even Temple of Doom all have him solving, like, puzzles in the third act. It's all about how smart does Indiana Jones appear to be, how much does he know his history, how observant is he. And that's the one thing I really don't like about this movie on the whole. This movie does not treat Indiana Jones like he's Indiana Jones at all. This movie treats Indiana Jones in a way where he is... I don't care that he's old. I don't care that he's out of it. I don't care he's retired. In fact, I would love it if he couldn't solve a puzzle, and that's what cost a supporting character a limb or a life, or put a supporting character in peril, and he has to sharpen up for the third act or something like that. What I don't like is there's only one puzzle to solve in this third act, and it is, how do we get into the cave?
Yeah.
And it's like, and once we're in the cave, it's a matter of crawling through tight spaces and kind of walking through with a little bit of whatever. I hated that. I think that they totally gut Indiana Jones's core sensibility of a third act, which is just, there's no adventure to the finale. And that's what this movie, I would agree. The first two acts are inoffensive, pretty fun adventure movie. Like, to me, it still wouldn't tick the needle enough to put it too high on my Indiana Jones ranking, but it would put it in a place where I'm not offended that this movie exists. It just doesn't do a lot of Indiana Jones things for me to call it a great Indiana Jones movie. Then it does exactly what you said. If you thought aliens were bad and you were outraged by aliens, your reaction to this ending should be outrage times a billion, because it's so much worse than aliens. It's so much dumber. And it's worse because the plot itself can't sustain this existence. And I was so scared, I thought I knew where this was going. Where I thought they were going to fly through the thing without going into fly through the thing. And we were either going to go to a familiar place from a previous thing.
Yeah.
Or we were going to loop back to the beginning of the story. And I would have been okay with looping back to the beginning of the story and basically working our way back to where we, like, through that prologue from a different angle. Or I was so scared we were going to show up at a familiar place.
That would
more de-aging and more everything. I was going to be so upset. But I still think this is just a baffling choice. To go where we go, to do what we do, and ultimately have it mean nothing is absolutely baffling. Because at least when you're like, oh, Raiders of the Lost Ark means nothing because he doesn't add it, it still means something to the character. It added something to the character. Temple of Doom added something to that character. But, like, this doesn't. In fact, it's weird. It's so weird that Indy's physically in the place he's in, mentally in the place he's in, and then is making the statements he does, and ultimately that whole thing is taken care of with a hit to the head, and we wake up in the epilogue, which apparently everyone loved the epilogue. I hate the epilogue.
Okay, I disagree. I think the epilogue was fairly tastefully done. I like that last reunion with that character. I think that last callback was really well done, and I think the final shot of the film, if they wouldn't have done that last little thing with the final shot, I think would have worked really, really well.
I would agree. The final shot of the film would have been a great final shot if they don't do the thing they do, which is also, but it also does the thing. Basically, the thing with the epilogue for me is that it leaves it in a dissatisfying place, because to me, it feels a lot like the ending of The Wizard of Oz, where it's like, or the end of the first of 1,000 endings to The Return of the King, where he's
that's the one. That's the one.
He wakes up and all these familiar faces start walking in and saying hi and doing this, and he realizes that he's loved and he belongs. And I'm like, this is really on the nose to fix a problem that we didn't fix narratively until this final scene.
I don't disagree with you, but that is my favorite of the 1,000 Return of the King endings. Like, if I were to end Return of the King, that is where I end it. But I totally see.
I mean, sure, and it's not like a bad archetype to do. I just feel like it's completely unearned with the movie that we just had, where I don't inherently hate what we do or who's there or what they say. I hate that it happens with everything that just happened before it, not necessarily leading us to this conclusion. To me, it feels like the thesis statement is not met until this final scene, where they basically just really quickly threw together something to kind of band-aid solution that we hadn't addressed the actual emotional conflict of the title character until the final scene, because we introduced like the problem on the boat, where it's like, okay, this is what he's going through. This is where he's at. This is why he is where he is at the beginning of the movie. But we don't address at the end, basically at the end of the movie, we're just like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. And all these people love you. And you're like, but like, I feel like it comes a little out of left field. I feel like it doesn't quite land as satisfyingly as I want it to. I feel like that final cameo needed to happen, and I'm happy it happened, but I don't necessarily love what they do. I don't necessarily love the way they interact. It feels a little weird. Both performances feel just a touch off kilter. And like you said, the final shot would have been so great. If the final shot happens, everything that happens before it happens, and the final shot happens the way it does without the final flourish, I would forgive a lot. I would forgive a lot about the movie. It's the final flourish where I finally went, you know what, never mind. I was like, you know what, never mind, movie. You didn't do it. To me, it ultimately symbolizes exactly what I think Lucasfilm does or what the Disney is doing with Lucasfilm, which is like, while I like a lot of the things they've done just as stories, I don't think they're bad stories. I think on the whole, I'm not satisfied by what they're doing, because I don't think inherently the people that are making the movies on a studio level necessarily understand why we love these stories or what makes these stories so good. And that's kind of where I'm left, where I'm like, do I love episodes 7 and 8? Yeah, I love them. I love Rogue One. I like Solo. I hate Rise of Skywalker because it's a bad conclusion for me. But at the end of the day, do I enjoy these movies? Yes, but it's not the Star Wars I necessarily would have really loved to have seen. And this, to me, really bothers me because it's the last one. They're only making one. We're making one to end it. And it's like, if we're making the one to end the series, whether you like Crystal Skull or not, to make up for Crystal Skull and sort of end it on a Last Crusade note again, where you're like, okay, I'm happy with where we're at. This movie just doesn't hit that for me. And in a lot of ways, the lack of Spielberg does it. In a lot of ways, it just feels like a generic adventure movie with an Indiana Jones modded skin in the game, and I don't love that. And at the end of the day, I'm really disappointed with where we're saying goodbye to Indiana Jones at.
Before we move into our final ratings, is there anything else you want to tackle, or do you think that pretty much was everything?
I do just want to make 2 small comments.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really love, like, he's not a character poster, so it's not a spoiler. I really like Antonio Banderas in this movie.
I do.
He doesn't contribute too much to the plot, but I really enjoy his character and I enjoy his performance, and I love that no matter where we're at, I love the idea that no matter where we're at in the world, Indiana Jones has friends, whether we know them or not. He's got friends.
Yeah.
And I love that Antonio Banderas still brings that energy. He fits right into, if you were in Last Crusade or Temple of Doom or Raiders, he feels like one of those characters in old age. And you're like, great, love it. And to even go further than that, I love Salah's inclusion in the movie.
Yeah.
To the point where I'm upset that he doesn't factor in more. Where it's like his final thing he says before the ending is so profound and is so powerful, and you feel like should be the thesis statement of the movie. And then they never really come back to that or address it in a meaningful way to that character either. Where Salah doesn't get resolution. Where you should almost feel like Salah plays into the third act, or Salah plays again back into the adventure, and he gets to have fun with Indy and go on the. And the only reason they do it is because John Rhys Davies is just fucking old. Like, I feel like that's all they do is they just don't put him in because John Rhys Davies can't do it. Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford honestly probably can't either, or shouldn't be. But those two characters should be on this adventure together. To me, it feels like I don't understand why he doesn't go into the airport with them.
I also hate to say it. I think another reason why John Rhys Davies may not have been in the entirety of it, like the majority of this film, is because calling a spade, the character of Salah has not aged the greatest when you consider who has played him. So maybe it's just like, you know what, we'll bring him back for like 5 minutes, and then
you can tell they're clearly doing it to be like, Salah is so important to this character in this series. We have to let him be part of the final one. And they don't want to put him in because they don't want like an Apu situation where it's like, this is a character who should be playing this part. But at the end of the day, Scully and I talked about this. Let it ride. Like, it's not appropriate, and it's not good necessarily in modern day. But this is the last one, and this is the guy. It's like this is the guy. He's played the part twice already. You're doing it one more time. This character needs to factor into the story, and he's the guy. Let it ride. Take the hit. Take the criticisms you're going to get on Twitter. Let Salah factor into the movie in a bigger way than the little cameo he essentially is.
Have you seen Temple of Doom? This has not been the most squeaky clean, politically correct franchise
since the beginning.
Yeah, since the beginning. Koho, we review some movies on a scale here of 0 to 10 videotapes. 0 is just painfully awful. 10 is astoundingly great. If you were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, what would you rate it?
I think, even talking out loud, I'm reserving a real final hardcore judgment for a rewatch, because I need to see how this holds up outside of an initial reaction, and I want to rewatch Temple of Doom again, because honestly, Temple of Doom, after watching this, maybe I am too harsh on Temple of Doom, or maybe I'm being too harsh on this, but it's like I need to watch these two together and decide which one I like the least for the series. And it might honestly be this. This might be my least favorite Indiana Jones movie, but for now, I'm putting it at 5. I'm putting it right in the middle, because the things that I really love about the movie, I do really like. Like, the opening, I like a lot. Salah's inclusion, I like a lot. For what it is. I like Phoebe Waller-Bridge a lot. I think that there's a lot of mishandling. I think there's a lot of lacking. And I think this movie ends on the most sour of notes ever. But I like Indy so much that seeing him do this one more time, while dissatisfying, the things I like a lot. The things I hate a lot. So it ultimately evens out to being exactly in the middle of the bunch. It's a 5 out of 10, a 3 out of 5, whatever you want to give it. It's right in the middle until I watch it again and see if it goes higher or lower, if I was too harsh or if I was too nice. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go a little higher than you, and I'm actually going to give it the 6 out of 10. Like you said, I'm honestly kind of in the mixed bag, but I think I'm just going to give it that positive rating, just because I do think, for me, for the majority of this movie, I am having fun, and I am kind of feeling that magic again. It's funny, while I do think this is better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I think Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is a better Indiana Jones movie personally, and I think just has that feel. And I just realized that watching this movie. Something I didn't really tackle on. This movie is way longer than I think it needs to be. I think you could cut this movie down just some good chunks of it to get to that like 2 hour, maybe 2:10 tops.
I honestly think you can chop about 35 minutes out of this movie. This could be a hard 2 hours, an hour 50 easily.
Yeah, but like I enjoyed Harrison Ford in the role. I enjoyed Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I think she's a great new addition. And hey, if you see this movie in theaters, stay for the credits, because John Williams' credit theme, pretty dope.
Which we should also mention, the one thing that is anchoring this to the other 4 more than anything is John Williams' score is fire. It is so good, and it is so sweet, and it's the link between all 5, where if visually this doesn't have the Spielberg flair or look like an indie or feel like an indie, it sounds like an indie movie, and that I like a lot.
before we head into our next review, I'm just going to open up to questions and comments for the audience, and I'm going to ask Coho a question. Coho, it's funny. You said that Crystal Skull was a movie that you went back and rewatched, and you enjoyed more than you gave it credit for. Temple of Doom was one of those movies for me. What is another big movie for you, just in general, that like you at one point really just didn't like, and then maybe years down the line you went back and rewatched and you realized, wait, this movie's a lot better than I thought it was.
I mean, there's definitely a lot of those for me. And
yeah.
Boatman will be the asshole in the comments who will jump in first and be like, I told him to rewatch that and then he liked it. I think one of the biggest ones for me, and Cody's in the chat, so perfectly fitting, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's one of those where like I wasn't like down on it. I just didn't love it. And the more I came back to it, the more I was like, no, I really do like this movie, or I really love this and I love that. And to the point where it's one of, I just adore it. I think it's a great movie. So that's probably the biggest one for me. Another big one of recent is not necessarily to the point where it's a movie that I would like sing the praises of for a lot of people, but for me, it's On Stranger Tides, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, which is one that I thought was an abomination, like so bad to this franchise, and hated it. And having revisited it more recently, I sort of realized I was being a little too harsh to the movie as a Pirates fan, because I don't think it's the perfect follow-up to a trilogy that I love, but taking it on face value as its own Pirates of the Caribbean adventure, it's not perfect. I don't love it, but I appreciate a lot of the elements to it. I appreciate that it looks and feels like a Pirates movie. I appreciate Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio's like writing, and how these characters are talking is true to the first three. So like I don't love Pirates 4 or 5 the way I love the first three at all, but I love that franchise to the point where it's like I do at least walk out of those going, I had fun. So On Stranger Tides went up from like a half star to like a 3-star, 3.5 maybe. So
as someone who is not a fan of On Stranger Tides, maybe I do need to give it a rewatch, but I am right there with you with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think that's a movie that does just, I think for everyone I've talked to, just gets better every single time you watch the movie, just because it's just such a great feel. One that I think is probably the biggest example for me is when Castal or Daniel Garcia says Halloween Ends is a dumpster fire. I would agree, but yeah, sure. Yeah, I don't think we talked about Halloween Ends, but sure. Moonrise Kingdom, when I watched it in like middle school, I thought, or maybe like early high school, I was like, I just don't get what this movie is going for. I just think it's too upwardsly quirky for no real reason. And just returning to it like as an adult when I was like in my 20s, I was like, no, I kind of like the feel this movie is going for. Like it's easily Wes Anderson's most Wes Anderson-esque film, but I think I just think I really do enjoy that feeling more and more. Love and Monsters is entertaining. I actually haven't seen that, but
I've heard it's good.
Yeah, but I hear it's good. But yeah, Moonrise Kingdom is definitely the one that I would probably go with. But Koho, thank you so much for joining me for this review tonight. Is there anything you want to plug before you head out?
Go check out Movie Melee. It's great. I love doing it. I don't think I need to like plug it too much for people, but I'll also say if you're not watching Your List Sucks right now, it is ending and we're having fun with the final couple episodes. So I can't wait till we get to episode not 200 and the look back and the farewell, and I think it'll be fun. So those are kind of the things I'm doing most right now. So if you still watch Multiplex and check around and look around, you'll see my face on the Melee side, and you'll see my face sometimes on the YLS bit. So, and Filmography right here on this channel. If you're not watching Filmography with me and Boatman, we're about to start Danny DeVito as our next mini-series. The film's directed by Danny DeVito. So we're starting with Throw Mama from the Train, which will be our first episode. So it'll be great.
Filmography. Go watch it. Koho, thank you so much for showing up tonight. We'll definitely get you on in the future. Have a great night. Thank you so much, Koho, for joining me to review Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny. But we are going to be jumping right into our second review of the night, Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken. This is the new film from DreamWorks Animation, directed by Kirk D'Amico. This is about a family of Krakens and their teenage daughter by the name of Ruby, who is attending human school. Essentially, they use the excuse that they are Canadians to blend in, and the reason as to why they don't look super normal. And Ruby really wants to go to the prom, especially with this new guy that she has a crush on. But she also is slowly starting to realize that every time she touches water, she ends up turning into a giant kraken. And how is she going to handle with those struggles of growing up? DreamWorks is kind of a mixed bag for the most part in terms of animated films. For every Shrek 2 or How to Train Your Dragons franchise, you get, and like the Kung Fu Panda franchise, you get something like a Shark Tale or like an Ants or like either of the Spirit movies. I think are pretty boring. I'm not a fan of the Trolls films. But like other than that, like DreamWorks recently though has been pretty good. I think 2022 they had Puss in Boots: The Last Wish and The Bad Guys come out, which I think were two really really great movies. So walking into this one, I was kind of unsure how I was going to enjoy it, especially because I wasn't a big fan of the trailers. But I ended up enjoying it pretty decently. One of the facts is I just think this world is really, really fun. We've seen this sort of idea before of like fantasy creatures living amongst humans and trying to like assimilate into their world and kind of like keeping their like more mystical sides a secret. But I think this movie does a really good job at setting that world up. I think it does a great job at showing that there are other fantasy creatures such as mermaids that are sort of like rivals to the Krakens, and who are the good guys, who are the bad guys in those scenarios, and how they've been like long lost enemies from the past. Another reason why I think this movie is works really well is the title character of Ruby, voiced by Lana Condor, is a lot of fun. She's your typical like awkward teenage girl that just really wants to like get away from her like family life, from being like so different from everyone she grows up with, and she just wants to enjoy the normal things that most teenage girls would enjoy, such as getting ready for that big night with prom and going with someone she does really like. And I think Lana Condor does a great job in her voice role of voicing that character. I think the majority of Ruby's family, her mom is voiced by Toni Collette. Her grandmother is voiced by Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda's character is sort of like the ruler of the Kraken people, and we sort of realize that Ruby's mom and her grandmother sort of are kind of in contention because her grandmother didn't like that Ruby's mom wanted to raise Ruby on the surface, so that way she could raise her without her grandma's like helicopter parental view towards her. And yeah, I think her dad, I believe voiced by I want to say Sam Richardson, and her uncle voiced by Will Forte. No, Will Forte voices a different character, but her uncle voiced by Coleman Domingo, I think are really, really great. It's funny, even though I enjoy most of this, okay, like in regards to the animation of this film, when we have scenes where we're underwater, I think it's gorgeous. Just like how like the How to Train Your Dragon films, I think something that I think they really, really tackled well is just the flying scenes. I think are just gorgeous. I think when we are swimming underwater with Ruby and her like family members, I think that is handled really, really well, and that hits like the like magical elements of this film super well. But like when we are up on the surface, I think something that I think this movie doesn't quite have the best grasp on are the designs of the human characters. I appreciate that DreamWorks never really has like a typical like standard archetype design for its human characters, but man, these designs just kind of look ugly and just weirdly like off-putting. And I don't think that was the purpose from the animators to make them look that weird. Maybe it was, and if it was, more power to them. I just don't think it worked. Like I just think of Ruby's friends, they all just look like odd for no particular reason. The guy she has a crush on even looks like weirdly off-putting, especially when you like hear the voice coming from him, where he just sounds like completely normal, like a regular teenage boy, but just like doesn't really have like a normal look to him. The one I will say is Will Forte plays a character named Gordon Lighthouse, who is like this lighthouse keeper who's trying to hunt for Krakens because he believes that Krakens are like the like devil, like the devils from the sea, and they're the ones that are going to destroy life on the surface. And I think that character is really, really fun, and Will Forte has a lot of fun with that character. And that character, his weird look honestly highlights that character to a really, really fun way. Another negative of this movie is early on in the film, Ruby saves her crush from drowning, and the person who takes credit for that is a girl named Chelsea, voiced by Annie Murphy, and we learn midway through the movie that character ends up being a mermaid. And without spoiling too much, the twist that happens with this character is so clear from the minute she is introduced. You know exactly what she's going to do to Ruby, and towards the end of the film, you know exactly how she's going to be playing her along, and there's nothing really interesting when we get to that big reveal. Like, it's supposed to be this really big moment, and it just kind of comes up a little flaccid, if I'm being honest. The other big negative of this film, the soundtrack is aggravating. Like, DreamWorks has always been known for just putting in, like, pop songs after pop songs into their films. And every time we're in, like, a montage of these characters, like, doing something, and you just have, like, a new, now that's what I call music, hit single pop on, you're just like, here we go again. And it just keeps me from, like, really, really investing in this film. It feels like something made not by a creator, but by an advertising executive or by a studio executive saying, this is how we can make this movie more marketable, and this is how we can sell this movie to a wider audience, is putting in these music choices. So I wasn't a real big fan of that. What I will say is this movie is 90 minutes with credits included. It honestly kind of flies by. And the fact that it sets up this world, it creates conflict between these characters. It doesn't just have one conflict, it has conflict with her family, with other side characters, and it does it in such a short time and doesn't make it feel super cluttered, I think is a really, really big plus. And I think if you do have kids, I think this would be a great, just like, nice 90 minutes to just sort of enjoy your time with. So yeah, going into final ratings, I would probably give this movie, I would give it a 7. I think it's a good animated film. It's not going to be one that I think is going to go down as like an all-timer. I don't think it's as good as something like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which was their last film. But I think if you do have kids, I do think this would be a great one to take them to go see in theaters. If not, probably just wait till it's on Peacock. But yeah, I definitely had more fun than I would have thought. I've seen some people compare it to Turning Red. I don't think it's nearly that good, but I definitely do see the similarities in like the like generational like trauma of like being able to transform and kind of being viewed as a monster. I do see the similarities, but I do think Turning Red is probably the better film of those two. But yeah, thank you all for watching this week's episode. Please make sure to like this video, share this video if you can. It really helps out a lot, and it helps this channel and this series grow. Subscribe to the video store. We are putting out great new content every single day. Just so many people work on this channel. We all love movies to an insanely high degree. Like Coho said, watch Filmography. They are going to be reviewing the filmography of Danny DeVito, his directorial works. Thank you so much, Coho, for joining me to review Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny. Next week, we are going to be reviewing Joyride, the new comedy, and the 5th entry in the Insidious franchise, Insidious: The Last. I believe it's Insidious: The Red Door. It's funny, I have never seen an Insidious film. I was thinking about maybe watching them all, but I think it's going to be more fun if I just go in kind of blind and see how this movie is to a newcomer. So that'll be a fun review. Don't quite have a guest for Joyride yet. I'm going to reach out to some people, see if they'd like to be on. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Thank you, Coho, for joining. We'll see you next week. And until then, have a great night.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.